Welcome to Beyond the Borders podcast,
where every story is a journey and every journey is an inspiration.
Beyond the Borders is all about highlighting the incredible cross-cultural stories that exist in our communities.
We want to provide a platform for their story to shine because they are so important in today's world.
These stories not only celebrate the diversity of human experience,
but also foster empathy, understanding, and connection.
Our mission here is to amplify these voices, so stick around and join us as we explore these stories throughout the season. Hey everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Borders podcast. We're very excited to be with you today. I'm Natalie. I'll be your host for today, and with me I have my co-host Rosie and Josue. In studio, we have EP8 joining us, and I'll pass it over to EP8 to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name's EP8. I'm so grateful to be here. And yeah, a little bit about myself. I think I've told you guys a little bit. I came here when I was a lot younger, probably when I was like 5. My family says I was basically born here with the way I act apparently. But yeah, I recently graduated college. I went to school in DC and studied international affairs because apparently I needed to learn more about the rest of the world. Yeah, something about it. Still don't have a passport, so we're working on that. So yeah, when I get that in order, then it'll be like truly international affairs.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been back in Colorado for like 6 months now. It's been like great to be back around family and everything. And yeah, I don't know if I have anything else.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned you came here when you were younger, and you've been in Colorado that whole time, right?
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about what it's been like for you growing up here, but then like knowing your identity, knowing that you are from Ethiopia, like you do have an identity outside of your quote unquote American identity.
Yeah.
And also like talk to us about what it's like in your community, right? Like I'm like you where I didn't come here when I was young, I was actually born here. But like people in my community are like, oh, you're basically American, like you're not even African at this point, you know? So like I wonder if you've had a similar experience to that and just what your overall experience has been growing up here in the US.
Yeah, I think I've been doing a lot of reflecting now that I'm sort of out of like school, which I think is like the biggest community where you interact with like so many different types of people and you're sort of just thrown into this bunch of like, you know, just whoever is around basically. I think growing up in Colorado, especially in elementary school, like thankfully I went to like a really diverse elementary school, and it was like me and my cousins. It was like one of us in every grade. Like it was actually starting to turn into a little gang. So, but it was really nice. Like, but I think I just had this like, not going to lie, like a weird like deep inferiority complex around my identity, where I just felt like more than anything, it was just like a wealth disparity thing where I was like, I could just feel the difference in like the things they did on vacation, like during summer break, the just where they lived versus where I lived. And I just really, I think I internalized it a lot. And I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck, like why do we even come here if like this is like comparatively how we're living. And I just really had a hard time like thinking like highly of like my family. I was almost like bitter because I was like, yeah, like I'm grateful we're here, but I also didn't really have that context of like why they left. Like I had forgotten most of what Kenya and Ethiopia was like, so I was just sort of like, yeah, compared to my like rich classmates, like nah, we do not got it. Like I was like, what? You're telling me this is like better? And so I think I was a little bit of a brat about that, but as I got a little bit older, I feel like I built more like pride in my community and more like love for the effort that they were making to give their children a better life. I don't know if I could ever be the one that immigrated to like a new country, no language, understanding nothing, and just like start fresh. Like, so I'm glad that it was like, I'm grateful that it was not my generation, or like it wasn't me to do it, because learning English was like so easy for me because I just like, you know, I was still so young, like it was still easy for me to pick up. And so I started to like really be grateful for the efforts that they made. And in that, I think trying to step away from like, okay, why do I feel like I need to be a part of these communities? Like, why do I feel like I need to be so assimilated? And a lot of it was because I associated like being closer to like this American ideal as being successful. And I was just so scared of not being successful because I did want to like make them proud. And to me, like having more money was what was going to make them proud. But ultimately, like they were still really like adamant on being like, no, like we do not want you to lose your morality. We don't want you to lose yourself to like American culture. They like were very like clear about like, hey, like, yes, we like love the freedom that you have in America, but be mindful of what you do with that and be mindful of where that takes you, because I think like America is a very like hedonistic culture where it's like seeks pleasure to the highest degree, and it doesn't have any like limit. Like it will like just keep pushing you to like keep doing more and more until you don't really know where you're going. And they were just very clear about like, okay, yeah, I want money, but like have a limit to how much. Like you don't need to be a millionaire, even you don't even need to be a billionaire for sure. Like have like love and like respect for others, and like don't just be seeking out to like to your own like endless capacity. Be mindful of the way that it's going to come back to you and how other people even feel about you, because like yeah, you can do whatever you want for yourself, but then what does that leave? Like a trail of like heartbreak and misery behind you, and then what? Like you ultimately, like, no one wants to be around that type of person too.
Right. Yeah, and those things are like, it's always clear in retrospect what you're saying too about like growing up and feeling like everybody else had like nice things, or everybody else like had money, or people were going on vacations to Europe. Like my nephew, you know, he was born here too, but he was just like complaining to his parents last week about how like all his classmates are like going to Europe for the summer, and his mom had to tell him like, look, you're not in that situation with your classmates. Like we just don't have the same luxuries, and that's okay, you know. But I think it's clear like in retrospect as we grow up that like we do have a lot to be grateful for, and even the fact that like our parents came here and made something for themselves so that we could be could be someone too, you know. It's a real blessing. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
I think even just picking up on that, you know, topic while we're on that, how do you feel right now? Because we're still living in this in Colorado, right? Because Colorado used to have a huge, like an enormous, you know, wealth disparity amongst people, and you were able, you say you as you grow up and now you are grown, and what helped you, even though we're still living in this right now, you know, what has helped you to like, you know, to know, think of that as much, but like just, I don't know, living by maybe, you know, the word of your parents, like what they taught you.
I think always going back to like, why do I feel that I need those things? Like, where is that rooted in? And a lot of it is, of course, necessity. Like, I'm not going to act like you don't need money to survive, but there is a certain point where you're just seeking something just for the sake of it, just because you're told to, not because you've truly identified that as something that you need and that's something that you really want. And I'm like, when I think about the things I've truly want in my life, it's like money is the ends to the means, but it's never been this thing of like, okay, when I have this amount in my bank account, then I'll sit and be happy with myself. Like, I think I've been happier with less, and I have also like had more and been like, yeah, I don't actually feel that much better. I don't feel as well as I thought I would. And so I'm like, if the way how I act about money and how I act about myself now, there's no reason that the future is not just going to be the same thing, but just with more money. Like, and I don't want to develop that habit where I just can't separate myself from the things that I've been given. And like, ultimately it's a blessing, but it's also a test onto myself of like, what do you do with those things? And do you do good with them, or do they just feed into your like separation from others and separation from actually yourself? Because I think for a lot of people it's like, you know, that joke, it's like, oh, don't worry, like it's about the money I'm standing on, like I'm 6 foot with all these acts. And I'm like, okay,
we were talking about this in one of our other interviews that we did, where I was like, people are always joking like, haha, I'll be crying in my Maybach, but I'm like, that's not funny. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're still unhappy. Like, it's not about that. And I think that that's like a core value too in like a lot of African cultures. It's like, we are taught that money is important, right? Like, money will always be important. It makes the world go around, and it would be silly.
We love gold.
Yeah, we love gold. We love diamonds. Like, we, you know, and we have a lot of wealth in our countries, you know. But it's that like separation of like, why do I also feel like I need so much money? And at the end goal, like, am I wanting so much money to do materialistic things, or am I wanting so much money to like
to do good,
and to be comfortable and to like support myself, or support if I have a family, support my family, things like that, you know. And I want to pivot just a little bit and talk to you about like kind of your cross-cultural experiences, right? So first of all, like coming here when you were really young, and then growing up in like the Ethiopian diaspora, and then also being kind of like a minority within the Ethiopian diaspora, right? And then on top, well, a majority minority, essentially,
Yeah,
right?
we'll get to that,
Yeah, we'll get to that, right? But like a majority minority in a weird kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
And then like also choosing to go to an HBCU and like having that
Howard.
experience of an HBCU, you know? So I know that's kind of a jam-packed like
Yeah.
question and a lot to talk us through, but like just talk to us about all of those experiences. Yeah.
I do want to make one last point about what we're talking about wealth. It's like, I think for a lot of people, it's like, do you just have little, or do you just not have the ability to do more? Like, do you not have the ability to do the damage that you truly would have? Like, when we think of like African dictators, we're like, oh, like they're the worst of us. But I'm like, no, they just have more access to do bad. Like, I don't think that we're also exempt from the harm that we would have done.
Yeah.
We just don't have the means to. That's my last point. I don't know if that like
no,
really ties in, but
it's
I'm like,
fair. Very
you know?
fair. And it's like you see that too. Like Rosie always says, like when people have a lot of money, you always, or like a lot of access, you always see who they really are.
Exactly.
Like whether if you're really a good person, if you're really really good, when you have a lot of money, power, and access, you have the opportunity to prove that. But if you're actually a bad person, like when you have a lot of money, power, and access, you also have the opportunity to prove that as well. And it's not even that you're actively doing it, it just comes out because it's who you are. Yeah.
You're just having a means to
Yeah.
do it. But yeah, back to your actual question.
Yeah.
That was a lot of, that was a little bit of a layered question that you asked.
It's a lot.
Where do you want me to start? I don't know where to.
I would say, and y'all can like chime in too on what you think, but I would say talk us through like growing up in the Ethiopian diaspora in your identity, like your unique identity, and then also like what your experience was finally like coming into that, if you have come into it, and then going to an HBCU and what that experience is like.
I think like in terms of like being Oromo, I think it all really, I didn't really feel like the extent of maybe what like the difference was. I'm like always so proud of my community. I think they're so resilient and they have so much love for each other, and I'm always so proud to be from them. And I think when we look at like Ethiopia, it does make me feel so sad for everyone, because I'm like, there's just no like, it's like these farmer people, it's literally everyone's so poor. And like I always say this, it's like regardless of like where you're from, like the people that are in power are like continuously like pushing us against each other, and then leaving us like more broken than they found us. And then thinking that like this overzealous pride of in our like ethnic groups will be our freedom, but it's like it's never been the freedom that we're looking for. But I don't know, I feel like I've had a more complicated like relationship with like my identity, but I don't know where it's leading me. Like I don't know if I have some like grand conclusion about what it means to even be Ethiopian and be Oromo. I think I had more like confidence in it when I was younger, but now I'm sort of like, I'm just sort of sad for the country. Like I'm just sad about the state it's in. I'm sad about the prime minister we have and the war that in Tigray, and the way that the people are just, it's one genocide after the other, and it's one ethnic group being massacred after the other. And I'm like, what are we going to leave? Like, when is it going to end? And ultimately, I don't think that that's going to be on my generation. So yeah.
That's a sentiment that we hear a lot too amongst like other Ethiopians that we talk to, of like the sadness that a lot of people feel of the current state of the country.
For I know you still have to like probably answer the question, but like for people that don't know anything when we're in Ethiopia, you know, in your tribe, ethnic group.
Technically we're supposed to call ethnic groups.
Your ethnic group. For anybody who doesn't know anything about Ethiopia and your ethnic group and your people, looking at the camera right in front of you, what do you want to tell them?
I think that what I want to say is that Ethiopia is like an extremely diverse country in the way that the people look and that the languages they speak. And I think when we build familiarity around like our own understandings of Ethiopia, we usually do it under one lens, and we make it seem like a homogenous community when it's really not. It's like so beautiful that so many different people can be found in one country, and to always try to learn more and to understand people's pains and the way why they don't want to be associated with this Ethiopian identity. And I don't think that there is a conversation about like, I don't know, it's called ethno-nationalism, and that's important, but also not discrediting that the reason people don't identify with a lot of things is because of the constant lack of, like the constant erasure and then the lack of representation. You can't constantly ask someone that doesn't feel at home, like, oh, why don't you call this home? So I think it's trying to see that and having empathy for each other in that pursuit of hopefully a better tomorrow.
And I think in conversations that we've had with each other and previously, we kind of talked about that too, about Ethiopia and how it's so interesting because when you meet people from Ethiopia, I mean, Josie, you can probably relate to this, being married to somebody from Ethiopia, but like, I think that whenever I've met people from Ethiopia, it's kind of like, oh, I am this, or even if they're like multiple ethnic groups, they'll be like, I'm Amhara, like Oromo and Gurage or whatever. Like they'll tell you all of them, you know? And I think like historically, even looking at Ethiopia, like yes, Ethiopia was never colonized, but again, like we've talked about, they experience a lot of the same issues that countries that had been colonized are experiencing. And I think that like overall, like when you look at the historical legacies of Africa, like the issue with the historical legacies of Africa is that we were forced into molds that were not made for us, right? And so even like the country molds that exist, like the ideas of countries, like Africa was like, I think it was over like 100,000 like different tribal nations or like ethnic groups before colonialism, and that's like a very like broad number. Like I think the number was way more than that. There were a lot of groups, and like they fought conflicts between each other, but they also had agreements between each other. But they didn't need to have like countries or like national pride to exist, and that came like countries are a result of colonialism, right? And like the borders that were drawn were all a result of colonialism and literally dividing up Africa. And so even the fact that like Ethiopia is a country, but then also didn't experience imperialism, fortunately, but also didn't have that like forced upon them like national kind of identity, like, but and now trying to no, I was just gonna say, and now trying to like establish that, right? But then everybody is still like, okay, like there's Ethiopia, but we're still still who we are, you know? Like versus like in Ghana, for example, we all know what our ethnic groups are, you know what I mean? But if you ask somebody first and foremost, they'll just be like, I'm Ghanaian. You know what I mean? So I think that that's also interesting to reflect on, of like how even though Ethiopia wasn't colonized, the colonial like ideologies or like the colonial like strategy still impacted them
100%. Because imagine like right now, like every state except Colorado like somehow got occupied by a foreign nation. There's no way you're not going to feel the pressure of it. You're not going to be exempt from like, even say there's tariffs and like now you have to have a passport to leave Colorado and come back. Like there's just nothing that would stop you from not feeling that. And it's like it's interesting because then you'll see like if you go by like ethnic group maps, like they will extend into Kenya and Somalia and like whatnot. And it's like, okay, you can see, okay, the people that were on those borders are going to be taken into these like now like colonial states, but they're still a part of their ethnic group. But I don't know what it is. I do know what it is, actually. I know what I think it is. I think it's that like in order for even like now in neocolonialism, like past the like, you know, scramble for Africa and like where we currently are, it's like these countries have to almost play this game of like, we're going to play into capitalism, we're going to play into the system, because if we don't, like, we don't get the support from these big world powers. So I don't know what I feel about that on its own. Like, I'm not gonna act like I don't understand that they don't have the power necessarily to not engage in it, and that it's not just like a trap. Like if you think about like the, what is it called, the like World Bank, like the like being IMF, like being funded by them, and then being like, okay, there's interest on it and we want these rights, and
you also have to do things our way, because if you don't do it, we'll take the money away,
and you still have to pay the full thing, even though when you look at it like logically, they're actually getting more out of the countries than they ever gave into it. So it's really confusing to try to like map out. And I think when people have like really what to them feels like a clear answer, I'm like, I never thought, it's not that simple. Like I wish I could just be like, we just all need to. I'm like, okay, thank you so much.
It's hard. There are no clear answers, and there are no clear answers. Like even everything that we've just talked about has been like our theories and speculations, like based on our experiences and our thought processes. And Yeah, and it's just there's no clear answer, and I think that like I mean a lot of people, and leave a comment below and let us know, but a lot of people even have gripes about like the argument that I make about like colonialism and imperialism. Like there are a lot of people who don't agree with that and don't subscribe to that argument and its impact, you know. So I think that it's varied and there is no clear answer and there is no easy answer.
So, I don't want to talk about like Ethiopia.
I wanted to transition.
I want to move in. Like, I want to move on to like your experience like at university. You said you went to HBCU.
Yeah.
Can you just like tell us more about that experience, the challenges, what you learned after graduation? So, just like tell us more about that experience.
I guess now is a good time I think for me to like really look back at that experience. 'Cause it's only been like a year now. I think I'm happy that I went to HBCU. I think that was like a very necessary step after living in Colorado for my whole life.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's just good for anyone. I think like it really does allow you to like look at yourself past like your blackness, be it whatever form. Like if you consider yourself African or Caribbean or African American, like just seeing yourself past like being a representative of the like African diaspora, like you, and like knowing that whatever answer you give or whatever you say is not taken as like, oh, you're the face of all black people. It's a bit much when you're like 18, and you want to be able to make those mistakes freely without that like extra level of judgment. I think me and my friends were just talking about it the other day. I was telling them, they're like, oh, do you feel like you came out of it like more confident or less? And I was like, it's such an interesting question, because there was this like trend on TikTok. It was like the Howard glow up, and it was like people their freshman year and then their senior year and how much they glue up. And I was like, yeah, like I see that. And then everyone was like, oh my God, what's in the water there? Like everyone looks so good. And I was like, yeah, everyone's so beautiful, and I love that. But I think I had this weird thing where I had to like disassociate from like beauty in general and like black beauty, because I was like, I'm not gonna get anything done if I cannot just walk past, like go to class and not think about like, oh my gosh, I saw like the most beautiful woman in the whole world. And like being comparative. And I think I was just like, yeah, like it's beautiful, everyone looks so beautiful, but it's just not. I think like trying to get past like, you go from a space where it's like there's not a lot of black people to just all black people, and so like the beauty standard is like now it's actually like related to you. Like you if you're in a room of like just white people or Asian or whatever, like I don't think I'm like, oh, like how do I look compared to her or him, whatever. But if it's just black people, I'm like, ooh, like
you looking around like, dude, she's real pretty. I get it.
I get it. Starting to like try to really get out of that mindset and like just have like neutrality, I guess, where I'm like, okay, like beauty is beauty, and like as silly as it is, like it just doesn't matter. And I just think I got past that because I don't know, I just had to stop prioritizing in myself, and then I could do it in other people. Like, I can't ask others to do something I'm not doing for myself. So I think I got a lot better at being like, no, like I have a lot of other valuable traits. Even on my worst days.
Did you ever feel like you fit in that community? Because me personally, like, I went to University of Oregon. We had Black Student Union and African Student Association. So it was like for African and then, African American. The first time when I went to the Black Student Union, I really didn't feel like I was in the right place. So I had to go to African Student Union, where we were talking about like politics in Africa, and so that I felt home there. And I made more friends there, and then I was able to integrate on on campus because of that African Student Union. Did you feel that
I
way?
think I've been trying to. There's like this term hotep, and like like. And I think it would always like come around a lot at Howard, where it's like, oh, like who's the hoteps? Like the one that's very much like Black Power, Pan-Africanism. And like I'm not gonna lie, that was a little bit of everyone, so I'm not gonna point fingers because they'll be pointing at me. But there was a level to it, and I think that there was an African Student Association, and then there was an Ethiopian Eritrean Student Association.
That always takes me out. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Really?
How there's like an African Student Association, then the Ethiopians and Eritreans are like, we got our own. We got our own thing. Sorry. See you later.
I'm not gonna lie though. Like it was mostly like Nigerians in the African Student
A lot of
Association.
people say that, yeah, like
And
West
I'm not yet,
Africans,
I love the representation.
A lot of people say that. A lot of people have like gripes
Yeah.
about that, like about an African student union.
Yeah, I
about
was
the
like,
fact that it's
I'm
like
sorry.
predominantly West Africans.
Yeah.
Which like I profited off of. You're
You're like, oh no,
yeah,
more of them.
sorry. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Excuse
No,
me.
it was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. Like I would go to some of the events. I don't think I wasn't involved in either really heavily. I think I don't know. I wanted to give people space to like explore what they felt they needed to and their like what they means for them to be Black. But I'm not gonna lie. I think this was like when the peak of like a lot of things were happening in Ethiopia, and like I just was like, I'm sick and tired. Like I just don't even want to think about like what it means to be Ethiopian. Like I didn't really identify as Ethiopian, like, and I still don't really, like I don't. So I was just like, I didn't feel like at home with the Ethiopian Student Association. I just didn't really feel the need to be involved in it. But I think something that I really learned is that the same way that like Africans were like relearning our identities and like redefining it when we're in America, like we really do need to give African Americans space to do the same
100%.
when it comes to their connection to Africa.
100%.
And there's been like a weird shift where I feel that there's this like possessiveness over like Africa as like a concept, and I'm like, which is, we could talk about how it's not like one homogenous thing anyways, but like in sharing culture and like letting people find where they feel at home, like I was like, you know what, like I don't have any ownership over any of Africa. Maybe like one.
You're like 0.01%.
I'm like looking at my grandpa like, we got some land.
We have some land, yeah.
Trying to get in that will, so we're working on that. But you know, like I don't own it, and so when someone wants to find like home in it, and I can understand why, when the closest thing they have is America, who am I to stop them? So just being open to sharing. I think when you feel comfortable in your relationship to your home, then you feel okay to give a little, and I think that's where a lot of that like, oh no, like there's African and African American is different came from, was like, I feel like Africans, we're struggling too with like, well, we don't even live there. We don't even really feel connected. And the people that are back home would consider us American or whatnot. And so it's like, I understand the insecurity, but move on.
I wonder too, like being at Howard, your thoughts on what I'm about to say and just like having that experience. Cause I was always like raised up of being like, they would tell me that I was Ghanaian and that it was important to identify as that, just because me identifying as African American but not relating to the African American experience was also like not right. Valid. And like it's okay to say I'm African American, obviously, but like understanding the difference between like the African American experience and the African American, like the history of African Americans and how like our histories are intertwined, but they are very different. And as a Ghanaian American who my parents are from Ghana and like did not experience anything that African Americans have experienced in this country, it's also like there's a fine line of like what to do with how you identify yourself and what kind of identity you assume or what you take on or what you can and can't relate to. And also like I attended one of Rosie's public speaking classes, and there was an African American woman who was in the class and she was speaking, and she was saying how like you all of you immigrants and like even first generation people who are in this class, you all benefit off of what my ancestors, were doing, you know, and had my ancestors not like fought these battles, you would not be benefiting. And that was like another reminder for me of being like, okay, like that for me is why it's important to separate our identities from the African American identity, because we just don't have the same, like it's not the same. And in a lot of ways we have a certain level of privilege as Africans being in this country that we have to acknowledge and check a lot of the times when we are talking about African Americans or African American experience, or even being in African American spaces. I feel like we do have to be cognizant of that. And I wonder like if you felt like there were times in school where like you had to be cognizant of that, or like check your privilege and be like, this is not my place or my space to do or say certain things.
For sure. And I think it reminds me, there's this book, I've read one chapter of it, but the good first chapter. It's called The Body Keeps a Score, and it talks about how like your body, like all humans' bodies, like hold trauma like intergenerationally, and how the ways that we express ourselves are often a reflection of like generations of like epigenetics. I don't think that's it's like your genetics change with like the way that it's expressed differently based on like the way you live. And so if you're constantly in states of stress, like you might be more prone to certain things. like, for example, if like a famine is going on, then like you're over a couple generations now, like obesity and like blood pressure goes up because like during that time they had to, like, their bodies like had to keep all of the like nutrients and all the food, and so like in just a couple generations you have a completely different like look and everything, and that's like a physical way of seeing how we, if you looked 100 years to now, that community has completely shifted. That's like more like, I think reference like Bangladesh and like how they've experienced, and like India and how they've experienced like colonialism. But like when we think about African American community and how they've experienced like the wrath of American like slavery, I think genuinely like understanding like there's no way to disconnect from like hundreds of years of so much stress and like pain on the physical and the mental and the like it was psychological torture. And I think we downplay it so much. Like there's so much that we would learn about. Like there were literally like slave owners that would get slaves just to torture them, not even
Their
for
terminologies were
produce.
to break them.
Yeah.
Like as if they were animals. You know what I mean?
They would treat animals better. Let's be so for real. Like they would rather live on their dogs and like treat them like people. And I'm like, I will never be the person that sits and is like, oh, why is the Black community in the state that it is? Why is it the way it is? Why are they having these like conversations? Like, why is it not moving forward? Like, look at the African community. Like, they've been here for however many years, and look how far they've gone. I'm like, yeah,
It's not the same.
it's
not
the same conversation.
It's not the same conversation.
You're not coming from the same thing. Like,
and sometimes you even have to check other Africans, because sometimes they be the first ones to say crazy stuff, and you have to be like, hold on,
Exactly.
wait, because there is that level of privilege that exists in our communities, and we would be absolutely remiss to act like we don't have any privileges. Or like even when like Africans talk about Blackness in the US, I'm like, you still have privilege, because if you meet somebody who has a problem with African Americans, they will always be like, oh, you're different because you're African. So like even if we are differentiating our identities, it has to be from that standpoint of respect and of understanding that our experiences are different, but not of, oh, we are better, or oh, we are, because we're only able to even be better, or have, not even better, we're able to be better human beings and to further ourselves because of the African American struggle in the US, and because they fought for Black people to have rights, and that umbrella covered us as well. So there's a lot of gratitude that I feel like Africans also owe like this community.
why would we even move here if they didn't
Because
do the
exactly, if
things
they didn't do that, why would we be here? We wouldn't
Like,
be
we
here.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
Gratitude and respect. I just feel like we're gonna be talking about this even more, in season 2. But gratitude and respect, because I feel like oftentimes some Africans, I would say, I would say audacity to talk about how some Black community, the way they are, like what you guys said, and it's when you think about it and you reflect on it, I'm like, well, I came here, I didn't experience anything, in terms of like, police violence, right? I grew up in Africa. I didn't experience that, and I came here, and this thing is psychologically it's been going on for years. It's not something that has happened 5, 6, or 10 years ago. It's like hundreds of years that this thing has been going on every single day. So like me myself as African, like Natalie said, when usually you talk to some people, they're like, oh, but you're different because you're African. I'm like, really? Because if we're in a room, full of Black people, nobody gonna know I'm African. Like
And that's the thing, like people say that, but it's like nobody knows. And sometimes, but I've also had African American people be like, but I knew you. And I'm like, but did you?
No, they know. I don't think anyone's tricking anyone.
I don't know. I'm like, I feel like I don't know. Like I always just looked at myself as Black too. So it was just like, I knew I was Ghanaian, but I didn't feel like I don't look quote unquote Ghanaian. Like if you see a Ghanaian person on the road, like you could know that they are Ghanaian. But if you saw me, you wouldn't know that I am Ghanaian. You know what I mean? So yeah, that concept is so interesting, and I feel like we should have you back to talk more about that experience, like on the next
If people
season.
want it.
Yeah, because I think it's something we need to talk about. But I don't want to like waste up all of your not waste, but I don't want to use up all your interview to talk about that, because I also want to like talk about you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that that's a topic that I just think like, and I think that like you being in that space is a very unique perspective, and even like talking about like the Ethiopian Eritrean student associations to like juxtaposed like the African student associations. I think the more I talk to people about that, the more clarity I get and the more I understand it too, because the cultures are very insular as well, you know, and so like whereas like West Africans can relate to each other, or even we could find things to relate to with Congolese people. Like we can find things to relate, but it just doesn't apply.
There's footwork and
Central
shoulder shaking.
Yeah, like it's just not the same. We're not doing the same thing. Yeah. But just moving on to like where you are now, right? And being a year out of undergrad, so you're pretty young. And you know you've lived a couple of lives in the last year. Yeah, so you were at Howard, and after Howard you were teaching for a while, and now you're working with other refugees. And I just wanted to ask you kind of, how does it feel for you to have gone through kind of all these phases in this last year, and also like what do you feel like you get out of having the opportunity to work with other refugees at this point, like in your life, and what does that do for you and your identity?
I think, I'm not gonna lie, I think it's been a rough year, not my best one, but definitely one that was needed. I think, you know, the pressure and like just all of the things happening were essential for me to really build some clarity around not like what life I wanted, but who I wanted to be while things are happening around me. And really getting out of this mindset that like life is happening to me, and I'm just like some type of like sad victim of like whatever circumstance. And I was like, no, like genuinely, like life is coming from all of us, and like it's in the way that we choose to move and the way that we choose to handle situations. And I've definitely like learned that when a situation usually like, or whatever it is, a job lasts a minute, and it's like whatever you take from it and whatever way you choose to like, whoever you choose to be in that role is what like outlast the actual original like conflict or the struggle. And trying to limit how far I let things like take me, like just having this like acceptance of everything as it comes, like because I realized that I was thinking about the other day too, where like I get really frustrated when I'm late to things, or when like my friends make me late and I'm like waiting outside their house. So like that is like my biggest pet peeve. Everyone knows that, like, it's just not like I just can't handle it well, because I'm like, guys, please hurry up, get out of the house. And I'm like at their door. So like I've always been like really bad about that. But I realized like even if we know we're late, like even if I know it and like my friends know it, I always make the situation worse for myself, because now on the drive there, I'm still thinking about what happened. Like why we were late to begin with. I'm like, I haven't accepted that this is a like situation we're in. I haven't moved past it. And like the faster I've been able to like accept it, like being okay, like we are in this and that's it. Like that's it. There's no reason to even think about why we got here. What's the next step? Like I think getting older means like being quicker to accept what's the reality of life, and not being so caught up in like what you think you should be doing or where you think you should be, and like judging your own character as like a continuing thing that's always being molded. Of like I love this idea that like your name, you were given a name and it's only yours because people keep telling it to you, and like people keep just like, if someone just one day decided to stop calling you Natalie and everyone agreed, like how much ownership do you feel you have over your name? It's like it is always like you were given to yourself, like that name was given to you too. And so it's like our character is so similar to that, in that like it's something we almost give to ourselves, and we give it to ourselves in the way that we act every single day, and how we keep like reacting to every situation. And I feel like a character is so important to me, and not in that I'm judging other people, but judging myself. And like I don't think I've ever been like a bad person, but I've never like attempted to like truly work past something and not let it break me, or like not let it like be the moment that my character is not what I think it should be. And you are truly what you tell yourself. So like if I really believe that I'm a patient person, but I never show it or I never act on it, it's like, how true is that? Like you've said one thing, but you've never done it. And now you're left with like this conflict in your head of you're not who you say you are, and trying to align with who I really want to be, and not getting caught up in maybe even the bad traits I think I have. And like being like, okay, I don't want to identify with that too, because the same way you tell yourself good things about yourself, and you also can tell yourself and truly believe the bad things. So it's been a lot of like, I think that's like been the biggest thing, like really perfecting who I am as a person, and not waiting for like a perfect moment to be who I want to be. I think letting like bad moments be like, they actually are the ideal situation to really be who you say you are, because they really test you. The same way with like when you have the most money is when your true character comes out, is when bad things are happening, is when like your true character comes out too. Yeah.
100%, yeah. So thank you for all of this. It's been amazing getting to talk to you as always. One question that we like to wrap up with, just to end on a light note, is what is your favorite food from your culture? What is the food called? What's in it? Why should people try it? And yeah, that's it. That's the question.
I would say I ate the goat last time. The way, you know, the one that you brought in the office, it was good. So I
You
knew
may
it
go,
was-
girl. You may go in the office.
No, my mom made it. I was like, I made it that morning too. I was like, yeah, I'm feeling nauseous. Why am I smelling goat at 8
8 o'clock
o'clock?
in the morning, you said the house stinks.
No, literally. I was like, do I smell
Like you're always smelling your
I
clothes.
was like, Rusty, how did you know I'd go? But I guess I'm gonna name something that's like no one eats it. Like I'm actually like no. Everyone thinks it's nasty. It's called butla, and it's like a like porridgey. It's not. It's like thicker. It's like it's like as thick as like fufu basically, and like you eat it with like butter and butter in the middle, and no one else likes it. Like I'm the only one that ever makes it in the house, so I don't think a lot of people in general like it. It's like a breakfast food. Maybe it's high in some like good nutrients because I always feel better when I eat it. So you know, I might put everyone on.
Tell us the name again.
Budla.
Budla, can you spell it?
Yeah, BULLA. That's how I spell it.
Good luck.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, EP2, so much for joining us. We are so happy to have you with us today. And this is part 2 of EP2's interview. We did do a part 1 that doesn't have video, but this is part 2 with video. So please do also listen to the part 1 of EP2's interview. We did kind of cover some of the same topics today as well, but we really hope that you do get a chance to listen to her first interview because it was phenomenal. So be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment below, let us know what you thought of today's episode and what you want to see from us in the future. And be sure to follow us on all social media platforms and check us out where you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much.